We're joined by UFC bantamweight Brady Hiestand. Brady, what's up, man? How are you?
Good, good, brother. How you doing?
Doing very well. Happy to have you here. You're on a two-fight win streak, fighting Rinya Nakamura, UFC 298, February 17th. You've been on a bit of a layoff here. It's been 8 months since the last time you were in the octagon, and just seeing like where you're at, how you're feeling physically. Obviously, you're coming off staph infection. Just sort of give an update of where you're at right now and how you're feeling about this matchup.
Yeah. For my last fight, it was supposed to be in August. I had staph infection. Had to pull. The doctors ended up pulling me from that fight just due to the antibiotics and everything like that. I got over it pretty quick. A month later, I was back to full training and stuff like that. So now I feel 100%. I've been feeling 100%, training hard. Feeling ready. So I'm glad I finally got a matchup coming up, and it's gonna be a banger of a fight. Versus Rinya. He's a really skilled wrestler, got some power in his hands. So I'm excited.
How do you see this fight going? You're fighting on a big card. It's the Volkanovski versus Topuria card. That's a banger of a fight. Um, you know, just how do you see this fight going for you?
I think it's like I said, it's a good matchup. He's a good wrestler. He's got heavy hands, good kicks. Um, I think it's just gonna be like I said at the beginning. I was like, I think it's gonna be a barn burner. I think the way I win is I gotta make shit happen. I feel like I gotta push the pace. I gotta make it go everywhere. We gotta have striking. We gotta go grappling. We gotta make the fight as chaotic as possible. And so that's what I'm
Yeah,
looking to do.
love it. I mean, that's what happened in your last fight against Dana, right? I mean, that was that you had that crazy comeback at the end, it was wild ending. Um, that's I wouldn't expect anything less. Um, Not to bring up the past here, but I don't know if you saw that Ricky Turcios, he's fighting Raul Rosas Jr. Obviously, you went up against Ricky Turcios. Didn't go your way, but it was a good fight. Who do you got in that matchup? How do you think Raul Rosas fares against Ricky?
I definitely looking at that fight and after fighting Ricky, because I fought Ricky injured with no ACL, and so I was kind of going into that fight, and it was a close fight. And I've trained with Raul just a little bit, nothing too crazy, but I have a feeling it depends on what Ricky goes in, because Ricky is very a mental fighter, and his strongest part of his game is that he's so mentally tough, and he'll get hit and he'll just walk you down. And
Yeah.
so I think if a mentally strong Ricky comes in, I think he could get the win. But I think Raul is going to be better, like a stronger grappler. Not I don't think he's going to ever sub Ricky, but I can see him controlling him for at least the first round, and maybe getting some good control in. It just depends on if Raul has fixed his cardio issue.
Yeah, it
You
seems like
know,
Raul has that like Hamzat thing a little bit where he goes all in that first round and then he kind of like burns. He might burn out. He needs to get that first round sub. That's just something I noticed in the Christian Rodriguez fight is like he controlled that round and then after that kind of didn't have an answer. And I think that's the knock on Hamzat a little bit is that he kind of gasses in the later rounds. Not to compare the two. It's just off the top of my head here. What's training with the Aljo and Merab like? I know that you've been training with them. And speaking of wrestlers, I mean, geez, Aljo and Merab, that has to be helping you prepare for a wrestling match for a guy that's good at wrestling, right?
oh for sure, yeah. Train with those guys. When I go to Vegas, my main training partner has been Merab. Whenever I'm in them
Yeah.
on the syndicate mats, we're always like looking at each other. We're ready to go. So training with that guy has just been huge for my game. Not only cardio, but like just his technical wrestling. And then obviously Aljo. Aljo is like a big inspiration to a lot of the guys, including myself, because I think he was a D3 wrestler, but then he gets better. He does really well in MMA and ends up going and beating an Olympic champion
Right.
in wrestling in an MMA fight using his wrestling, which is so impressive. And
Yeah.
I think that's very that shows the difference between regular wrestling and MMA wrestling. Obviously, they work really well together, and Aljo had a wrestling base, but it just shows the difference and how you can integrate it differently in MMA.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Did you see Aljo his performance at his grappling match the other week when he was spinning the dude
Yeah,
around and scooting on the mat? That was hilarious. I don't know if you saw that.
yeah. I did see that, and it's actually funny because he has another grappling match coming up, and it's going to be against Chase Hooper, which is
Right.
another Washington guy. I've
Oh,
trained with
okay.
Chase a bunch. We both came up. We're about the same age.
Are you
So yeah,
conflicted on that? You feel like you got to root against Aljo because he's a Washington guy?
I'm taking a step back. Obviously, I love my boy
Okay.
Chase, but
Yeah.
I think it's a good matchup. It's cool because they're MMA fighters doing a grappling match, so there's less of a less of ill will towards each
Right,
other. It's
right,
more
right.
just like kind of a fun thing. So I'm just excited. I'm gonna be a fan in this one and just watch the sidelines.
Um, to get back to Merab, obviously Chito Vera got the title shot versus O'Malley, and obviously that's because O'Malley wants that rematch. But there is a lot of noise out there about whether or not Chito deserves the title shot. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like Merab is the rightful one to get the shot? Or do you think that this is just UFC doing good business? What are your thoughts on it?
It's definitely doing UFC doing good business because um, I obviously everyone knows that Merab deserves the title shot. They were saying that Merab was supposed to fight Aljo, and then they didn't want to fight, so they're like, "Oh, I guess you're not
Yeah,
fighting." So like, Merab's the guy that should be fighting on paper. Everyone knows that that's actually a fan, but the people want to see Cheeto versus O'Malley just because of the history,
yeah.
and so it's kind of conflicting because the UFC wants to make money. They want to promote the division and all that stuff. So as the sport, it like O'Malley versus Vera is good, but yeah, I think Merab deserved that title shot, and I think they're worried that Merab's going to take out O'Malley, and so that's why they wanted to do the Vera O'Malley first.
I
Because
see.
yeah, because if they do Merab versus O'Malley and Merab beats O'Malley, then the Vera fight's not really that as big of a draw.
Right. But obviously Marab's gonna have to. They cannot deny Marab a title shot. He's gonna get it. How do you see? I guess two-part question. How do you see the O'Malley versus Vera fight going? And then after, I want to know what your thoughts are on how Merab is gonna do against Henry Cejudo.
So I honestly think that O'Malley is probably going to beat Vera because if you watch the first fight, I think O'Malley was dominating most, like not like overly dominated, but I think he was on the path to victory in that fight until he got kicked weird.
Yeah.
And good on Vera. That was a good kick, but it kind of is a freak accident a little bit. So I think skill for skill, I think O'Malley wins that fight. 8 out of 10 times. Um, but that being said, I think the Merab versus Cejudo fight, I think they're very similar fighters. Just Cejudo's more skilled. He's got more experience in the actual technical side of wrestling and all that stuff. But I think Merab's pace is like almost unmatched in the division. So how I see that fight going is maybe Merab loses the first, maybe even the second round, just based on technique and stuff like that. But I think Merab's pace and his pressure and his ability to mix up the wrestling and the striking, I think wins him at least the last 3 rounds and probably takes home the decision.
Love it. Love it. It's an awesome matchup. It's exciting. Um, Aljamain Sterling, he's obviously one of the great bantamweights of all time. He's moving up to featherweight. How do you think he's going to perform against Calvin Kattar? How do you think he's going to handle himself at a higher weight class?
I think he's going to do just fine. A big thing you learn, like, as I've trained with a lot of different guys at the UFC and like at that high level, there's big guys at 35 and there's small guys at 45 and there's all in between. So I feel like I don't think Aljamain is going to be necessarily a small 145er. And he's so strong. I don't think he's going to be a weak 145 either. So I think him
Yeah,
moving up to 45 is going to be good for him. I think he's going to have a better gas tank because he's not going to have to cut so much weight. And I think he's just going to feel better, train harder because he feels better. So I think this move up to 45 is going to be good for him. And I think he's going to look better than he's ever looked.
nice. Is it weird training with guys that you could potentially fight one day? I mean, guys that are in your division. Is that something that you think of, or is that just the occupational hazard of being a professional fighter?
I think a little bit of both. At first, when I first got off Tough and like I had a little bit of a name, I would go down to Vegas and I'd kind of be weary of training with guys, just like
Yeah,
knowing that stuff. But that's how you get better. You're just training with the same old guys that maybe aren't the best like that UFC level. It's gonna be hard to take your game to that next level. You need to go test yourself against these guys, and if you fight in the future, you fight in the future. But training is different than fighting. So as things happen in the training room, it could be totally different when those lights are on.
absolutely. Brady, thank you so much for joining me. Brady Hiestand taking on Rinya Nakamura at UFC 298, February 27th. Don't miss it on pay-per-view. Brady, best of luck. Hope to be seeing you with a title shot a couple years from now. Let's make it happen, all right?
Appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much.